What was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? We had an hour lady who was extremely power hungry. She is walking around with the president of the company who flew in from Japan. She rushes him though the warehouse just spits out, "Oh, these other warehouse guys, we don't have to stop and talk to them." He stops, walks over, and starts talking to me about my last vacation. How buying my house went. You could just see her fuming behind him as we talked for almost 45 minutes. I've had multiple meetings with him. We knew each other really well. I don't think he liked her and drug it out on purpose, but I was thrilled to see her just standing there bored as hell. Our lady doesn't seem to care about human relations. She would order lunches at work for beating goals only for office people. Production and warehouse teams would come in and be told, "Oh, none of this is for you. But we make and ship the products." But that doesn't matter, I guess. When I was working customer service for a restaurant delivery service, not unlike DoorDash, I had a customer send in a complaint about hair in their food. The hair was sitting on top of the food. I checked their account, and they had one order on their account, which is a red flag. I check their phone number and find multiple accounts, each other 1-2 orders, all of them complaining about hair in the food. I deny a refund because the customer has actually used the same identical photo for the last order since they ordered the same thing. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again. Typical stuff that they always say. Eventually the customer gives up and ends the call, then immediately tries again. I get the support request, see who it is, then deny the refund again. She ends the call, then tries again. The person behind me gets the call. I tap the person on the shoulder and show them what I pulled up on my screen, and that person denies the refund. The next day she calls back and tries again and is outside of the refund window, so the customer demands to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor bans her from the service for multiple fraudulent refund requests. So we agree. Great. I've managed service industry for years, and the number of people who make that threat having never spent a penny is baffling, especially this year. I swear it's once a week right now that after I tell somebody to leave and not return, they've threatened not to return. I've had to have police remove people, and they'll scream about how they'll never return on their way out. Are the police dragging you out not enough of a sign that that's exactly what I want? What about the criminal trespassing notice you got? I worked for 8 years servicing communications equipment on site. 5 of those years were as the department manager. When oil was found in our area, we got so busy we could barely even think. Most of my team were pulling 12+ hour days 6 days a week, and we were struggling to hire people quick enough. One day, the CEO texted and said he hired an assistant manager for me, which was something I desperately needed. I was dirty as hell from my previous job and swung by the store to pick him up and take him to one of our sites where he would be doing paperwork. The moment he got in the truck, he immediately started talking crap. He started telling me about how everything we were doing is messed up and the department manager was a total moron and he would have my job within a few months. I just sat and mostly listened. He obviously didn't know crap about my industry, and every time he would say something wrong, I would try to politely correct him, and he'd either backtrack or insist that I was trained wrong. When we got to the site out in the middle of the West Texas desert, he complained about the layer of dust on everything and ordered me to clean up the entire site. When I sat down at my desk, the guy continued to bish my ear off about everything that was wrong and chastised me for sitting down at my desk when he told me to clean up the site. So I called for a taxi, filled out a notice of termination, and handed it to him. He looked absolutely shocked. Then he defiantly protested that only could fire him. I said, "And, right?" He sheepishly nodded. So I stuck my hand out for a handshake and introduced myself. I can teach anyone how to service equipment, but I don't have a clue how to teach someone to not be an asshole. As my previous foreman would say, I can fix dumb, but I can't fix stupid. I say that in game. Sorry, I can't heal stupid. That's a condition. I had a rough childhood with a drug addict father. My mom struggled to make ends meet, and my first job was paying for the mortgage. After several months of working, again at my first job, I finally had some money to spend on myself and decided to get a computer and a decent internet connection. At the time, the best internet I could buy as part of a dish combo package. I bought a dish and brought it home to install on the house. During this time my dad was still living at home with us, but he was hardly there, and my parents had all but separated at that point. My dad promptly asked me what I was doing, putting a dish on his house. I'll let him know that I pay the mortgage now, and I make the decisions on what we do with the house. I was young, but it was a very empowering moment for me. Guess revenge is a dish best served on the side of the house. NGL, that was clever. One of my new employees came from a competitor who is, shall we say, not as put together as we are. Her former boss had actually called me to yell at me about poaching his consultants, which, in and of itself, is weird enough. However, a few weeks after she started, the dude rolled up to our office. He had apparently been calling her to get her to finish an analysis for him, and she just ghosted him. I went to the lobby to see what the hell he was doing here. He started in on me again, and then she happened to walk by. I didn't fully understand the conversation, but at one point he literally demanded she do this analysis. She just said, "Or what?" and waited a few beats before turning on her heels and walking away. I did the old hand on his back point to the door universal symbol for leave, or a large security man will make you leave. Never heard from him again. I've got a similar story. Many years ago, we fired a salesperson. She was a compulsive liar and unethical as hell. She was also living under the delusion that the place would fall apart without her, and that we'd be begging her to come back in a couple of weeks. So it didn't sit too well with her when we hired her replacement. His first day on the job, she calls him up to cuss him out for stealing her job. Later that day, she called corporate. I understand their conversation went like this. That bastard's trying to steal my clients. He's going around town telling people he replaced me. Corporate, he did replace you. Harass him again, or any other employees, and we are calling the cops. That finally convinced her that we weren't going to be begging her to come back. Compulsive liar and unethical? Sounds like a great salesperson. Had an old boss who was a complete and total bastard. He was actually my boss and wasn't supposed to interact with us unless it was through our boss, but he just loved trying to make everyone under him squirm. The company had forced him to go to training twice because of how he spoke to people. One day, I get a call at home from him, and he just starts unloading cursing, name calling, insulting over some technical issue he just found out about. After a couple of minutes, I just looked at my phone and hung up on him. The next day, I get called into a meeting with his boss, who basically wants to know who the hell I think I'm hanging up on this guy. I calmly explain that no one gets to yell at me on my time, in my home, on my phone. You have to wait for me to be on the clock to pay me for that privilege, and I'll gladly take that money if I'm busy being yelled at. I'm not busy with anything else. Seemed to work. Brother, you are cool as a rice. I'm taking notes and slow clapping it out. I wasn't that cool back then. This was my first big job running a cooling plant, and I was a nervous wreck, chain smoking through every shift, and hating whenever this guy would rattle me. I think I was as surprised as he was when I hung up and stood my ground. Lol. One of my jobs is in a hotel/restaurant/bar. A guest came into the bar after having been refused service at our sister hotel down the road. He was very wasted and had been rude, abusive and threatening to the staff. He insisted we serve him as he was a guest, but we'd already been phoned by our sister hotel so they could let us know what the situation was. We refused, but offered him some water and suggested he go up to his room. He then went on about how he had nearly bought our hotel and that he was practically our boss, so we should serve him or he'd have us fired. We refused. He told us he was a very rich man and would tip us hundreds of pounds if we served him. We refused. He was getting abusive at this point, so we again suggested he have some water and head up to his room. He went on to tell us that his brother was the mayor, so we should serve him. We refused and told him he should go on up to his room yet again. He then said he was going to the pub across the street, but all the pubs/restaurants in our town have a barred from the mall policy. We telephoned the other pubs to inform them of the situation. Many of them got back to us and said they had been offered money, been threatened with losing their jobs, and also told the story of the mayor. All of the pups stuck to their guns and refused to serve him. Eventually, he came back to the hotel and went to his room. Unfortunately, he was the High King of Skyrim. My job right before my current one. Property manager, the owner was an absolute prick. He was heartless and rude and racist, and I loathed him. I hated every day going into that job, but I needed the money. I was applying daily to my dream company in hopes that eventually I'd be accepted. In the meantime, every time I complained or mentioned something to my supervisor, I was told to shut up and get on with it. He was paying me too much to have opinions. 3 years after, we were a small office and the receptionist and assistant prop managers had quit. I finally got accepted into my dream company and happily put in my 2-week notice. In desperation, he offered me more money, a higher position, better benefits, which were laughable. When I said no, he asked why. I have never felt more gleeful than the moment of when I said I don't know. I'm not paid to have opinions here. That was a year ago, and even now the look on his stupid old face gives me joy to this day. Ooh, I had a similar one of these. Employer advised she was shocked when I put in a notice. I calmly explained I'm not sure why. It was your idea. You could have heard a pin drop when I reminded her that she told me 3 months before that if I wasn't happy with a certain situation then maybe I should leave. Play bish games, win bish prizes. I have one that crosses with I don't work here lady a bit. I have a job, but I will still do interviews every couple years. This means the script is flipped a bit. They have to convince me to work there. Anyway, I got the town early, so I stopped at a bakery to get something to eat. The woman went in the back to get it, and this squat toad of a woman walks in, yells at me to get her order, and then yells at me again for not getting up right away to serve her. When I point out that I do not in fact work there, she goes off me about how important she is, etc. We can skip the play-by-play. I go the interview, head of it, and the toad woman walks in. She has this evil grin on her face. I stop everything. I point at the toad woman and I say something like, I have seen how your management treats people and I have no interest in working for you, and I take my resume out his hands and walk out. The look on her face was priceless. Oh, and he had walked in with a print of a resume, so I took his copy. Felt great to do. This is a life-changing idea. How did I never think of this? Do it. See what you are worth at the very least. But it is loads of fun to stop them and say I already have a job, convince me I want to work here, and watch them stammer. I was going for a supervisor job once, and I did that. They couldn't believe someone would say that at an interview. They offered me the manager job, one step up from where I was applying. About 2 days later, sadly the place got bought out and closed within a year, but still. I work at a hotel. It's high-end, so we often take the approach of just appeasing guests no matter what, so I frequently have to bite my tongue. However, we have a very desirable parking lot, and when people poach it we boot them. I love enforcing these, because I don't have to bite my tongue or apologize, as they aren't guests. My favorite one was this. Girl parks and walks to neighbor hotel. Our GM happens to be in the lot and says, hey, just FYI, this is parking for X hotel, not Z hotel. She proceeds to say frick you, flips him off, and walks into neighbor hotel. GM calls me and tells me. I giggle, grab the boot and slap it on her car. She comes back screaming and ranting. I tell her the cost is $200. She calls the police. The police ask, is this a private lot? Yes. Okay, then pay them. She refuses to pay and storms off. I get a call requesting the manager. I speak with them. It's the girl's mom. She is trying to say, oh, my daughter didn't know. She was for a job interview, yada yada. I'll let her go on. And when she finally stops making excuses, I tell her that her daughter flipped off the GM, and there is no way the boot is coming off without payment. On top of that, I tell her when she pays she better not come in swearing or yelling, or the price goes up to $300. She hangs up. The daughter comes back and silently hands me $200 with a look of rage on her face. I've never been so internally jiggly before. Just as an aside, are there any local regulations regarding private booting and price? Can you really just set your own price as you see fit? I mean, could you be like it'll be $10k? I think the maximum is like 350 in our area.